Okay, we'll pick up here with part 1B, talking about the structure now of Congress. And there'll be some differences between the House and the Senate that we'll start with. So we'll start with leadership in the House. The only office actually specifically set out for the House in the Constitution is the Speaker of the House. There must be one. Excuse me, it says there in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Just so we know, I think we mentioned it before, the Speaker is second in line behind the Vice President to be President. If something were to happen to the President and Vice President, the Speaker would become the President. Currently, it is Nancy Pelosi. Now, let me make a note. You do not have to know the names of these people, but you do need to know the functions of each of these. So we'll be talking about functions of different offices in the leadership. So you have to know the functions. Anyway, there she is, Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat from California. Okay, so speakers are elected at the beginning of each Congress. A Congress starts every 2 years. Right now, we're in the 116th Congress. After the set of elections here in November, when they get to work on January 3rd, it will be the 117th Congress. All right, each party puts up a nominee forward, and of course, the majority party will win that particular vote. So the Democrats have a majority in the House, so the Democrats' choice for speaker becomes the speaker. All right, the speaker exercises substantial control over the House. They are very much in control of the House. Remember, the House is more hierarchical and more structured than the Senate is. Just a note for here, often if the president is of a different party than the speaker generally becomes the national spokesman for that party. And it really was over these past 2 years, since when the Democrats got the majority in 2018. Nancy Pelosi pretty much has been the voice of the Democrats for the country, sort of a national spokesman for the country. Now, sort of, it's Biden because he's running, but it'll always be the president in the case of whatever party that is. So President Trump is the de facto spokesman for national spokesman for the Republican Party. President Obama was when he was, etc. Okay, so there's more leadership then. The majority leader then, these are offices. There are 3 of these you have to know beyond the speaker, and then there are 3 on the minority side. So majority leader, picture here again, you don't need to know, it's Steny Hoyer of Maryland. They are responsible for overall party organization in the House. They're basically, if the speaker is busy, they're really the leader of the party in the House, and the speaker has a lot of things to do. Then there's the next one in line, and these are in order. These are the hierarchy. Next person in line is called the majority whip. That happens to be a guy named James Clyburn from South Carolina. The whip is sort of what it sounds like. They keep the members informed and keep them in line, sort of whip them into shape, if you want to use that word, and that's the way it's said. It's the whip. They are the ones who make sure that the party stays disciplined. They're going to lean on their members if their members are maybe reluctant perhaps to vote or might be a no on something that the Democrats want. They're going to really start to put the pressure on to make sure they vote along party lines. So that's really what they do. And then there's the last of the leadership you need to know on the Democratic side. It's called the Democratic Caucus Chairman. The Republicans call it something different. His name is Hakeem Jeffries from New York. And that person organizes the party in the House. They schedule the meetings. They set the things up. They set the itineraries. They're really about what the House does as a whole, us Democrats, as far as what the House does on that side. On the other side, then, you also have to know these 3 positions, and they are very, very similar. 2 of them have the exact same name. The minority leader. Okay, so his name is Kevin McCarthy there from California. Responsible again for scheduling and overall party business. Almost the same thing as the majority leader. The whip is the same, except it's a minority whip here in this case. His name is Steve Scalise from Louisiana, and I'm not even going to put it. It's the same role. Keeps members informed in the line. I did put it there, but it's the same wording. So you don't really have to write that down again. As long as you know what the majority whip does, you know what the minority whip does. And then, excuse me, for the Republican side, they don't call it what the Democrats call it. They call it a conference chair. Same thing. It's Liz Cheney. from Wyoming, and that person, she in this case, organizes the party in the House. Same thing that the caucus chairman does for the Democrats. So same positions, just on the minority side. Senate side looks pretty much the same, except there's no such thing as a speaker. However, the vice president is the president of the Senate. We've talked about this before. You just need to make sure you remember that. The vice president, of course, is Mike Pence from Indiana. And do remember that one of the most important things here is there's no vote for the vice president unless there's a tie in the Senate. So the vice president would come over and break that tie if there happened to be one. And that doesn't happen very often. So that role generally is not played out. However, the main figure then is the majority leader. So same name as the majority leader in the House. The majority leader is the main figure. That, of course, is Mitch McConnell from Kentucky. They essentially do the functions that the speaker and the majority leader do together in the House. They schedule, they set the rules, if any, for legislation. They really are in control of the Senate, of what the Senate does, in consultation with the minority leader. The majority whip, again, same role as the House. So this is one where I'm not going to repeat the wording, but the name of the person is John Thune from South Dakota. So these are the two. So you need to know majority leader and majority whip. You don't need to know the third thing for the Senate. They do have their chairman and all of that for their conferences, whatever it is, but you don't really need to know that. So know these three roles. And then, of course, on the other side, on the minority side, there is the minority leader. That happens to be Chuck Schumer from New York. There he is. Role is very similar to the majority leader, except the majority leader gets to control things. They work together if they can. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sort of consult together to get the legislation going on the floor. Then, of course, there's the same as the majority whip. There's a minority whip, same functions as the House. So again, I'm not going to write that down, but his name is Dick Durbin from Illinois. So sort of similar to the speaker is the fact that there's a separate office here, but this person doesn't have a lot of power the way the Senate is organized. There is something called the President Pro Tem. The Senate has that. It's Latin for, essentially Latin for temporary. So it's the person who acts as the president of the Senate when the vice president's not there. But it's really a ceremonial role except for one thing. That person is third in line for the president. So it goes vice president, speaker of the House, then president pro tem of the Senate. That person happens to be, well, we'll get his name in a second. Generally, it is the senior senator from the majority party. When we say senior, we mean the one who's been there the longest. So the person who has been in the Senate the longest, that's a Republican since they're in control, is a guy named Chuck Grassley, Senator Grassley from Iowa. All right, let's get to this last part, committee structure. So we're going to get through this quickly. This is where the real work is done in the Congress, both the House and the Senate. They control the agenda, they guide legislation. They're the ones where writing legislation happens. They hold the hearings, they conduct oversight. This is where, again, most of the work gets done. Bills usually start in the subcommittees, then go to the full committees before being sent to the floor for votes. That term is called marking up. Basically, the writing of legislation uses the term marking up. All committees except the Ethics Committee have a majority of the majority party. That makes sense. So in the House, on all of their committees except Ethics, there's more Democrats than Republicans. On the Senate side, there are more Republicans than Democrats in the committees. That's because the majorities are essentially in control, except, of course, for that filibuster issue with the Senate we talked about. Chairmen are senior members. They're very powerful. They're not all powerful like they used to be, but they're usually senior members appointed by the leadership. They manage the bill when it gets to the floor. That means that they're sort of in charge of making sure all of their members know what's in the bill and things like that, and they sort of work with the whips to make sure everybody's on board. They conduct oversight, which is monitoring how laws are implemented, how money is spent, and the conduct of agencies. That's one of the other things that they do besides writing legislation. So the structure, really quick. You need to know these four types of committees, so got to know them. Standing committees, you need to know what standing committees are. They are essentially the permanent committees along with the subcommittees that go with them. This is where virtually all legislation is done. They handle the bills for their general policy areas. You'll see a list of them in a moment. There is one thing you need to know that's unique to the House, the Ways and Means Committee. It's unique to the House because the House has a special function. In Article 1, Section 7, the only place a revenue bill, that is a tax bill, a place where a bill is going to bring in money to the government, the only place they can originate is in the House, and they originate in the Ways and Means Committee. That means the ways and means of getting money. Okay, so the Senate can't start a tax bill. It has to start in the House per the Constitution. And it does in this committee, so you need to know that committee name. It is, of course, a standing committee. Here's a list of them. There's a couple more under my picture on the Senate side, but those are the standing committees, the ones that are there essentially all the time from Congress to Congress to Congress that does the real work in their areas, and you can see their areas there. Some of them are same as the Senate, some are different. The Senate has a fewer committees because they have less members. Okay, the next type is a joint committee. That is really what it sounds like. There are very few. They're specialized committees that consist of both the House and the Senate, hence the word joint. They do not really do legislation. They usually just gather information. The next type is the other more common one, the conference committee. So you need to know, especially need to know standing and conference for sure. Conference committees are formed to reconcile House and Senate bills that differ. Remember, they have to be the same bill coming out of both the House and the Senate to go to the president. So, and they usually never are. So they have to get together and negotiate and reconcile those bills so they can be the same. So they are different for every bill. They are very, very short in duration. They get together, they meet, they reconcile if they can, and then the bills go back to the House, and then again, it'll be a different one next time around. Once bills are reconciled, they have to go back to their full bodies for another vote. So, and then once they're the same, then they get voted on, and then it can go to the president if it passes. The last type is called a select committee. Those are formed for specific purposes to investigate, usually to investigate. Give you an idea, there was one formed for Watergate. There's one formed for investigating the Benghazi incident in 2012. There's one formed to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy, those kind of things. So those are the four types. You need to know the functions of those four types. The last thing, committee assignments. Newcomers are usually assigned to committees that make sense. And what we mean by that is, for instance, if you come from an agriculture state, you're probably going to be on the agriculture committee, plus some other ones, but that makes sense. It allows something called credit claiming, and that is an idea for us that we will talk about when we talk about incumbent advantage. So that'll be later on in this part of the unit, but it does allow credit claiming to be on things that make a difference for your state. Okay, moving up used to be totally on seniority. It still matters, but not 100%. But you're not, if you're a newbie, you are not going to be a chairman of a committee or a subcommittee. It's just not going to happen. However, the Republicans have a term limit rule for committee chairman. Democrats do not. They can make their own rules. The parties can do what they want. So they have, I think it's in the House, I think it is maybe 3 terms of Congress, so 6 years. In the Senate, it might be 2 terms or something like that. But they shuttle them in and out. The Democrats don't. It is much more fully on seniority for them. Okay, that is it for today. You'll have this, and then you'll have some reading to do. So make sure you get these notes. I know it's longer than usual. The other ones will be shorter. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.